Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 5 greatest Beethoven conductors. Oh, well, there are a lot of good Beethoven conductors. We know that. But the 5 greatest ones, who are they? Oh, this list may have some familiar names in it, and it may have some controversial names. But I think it's an interesting one, and I'm very curious to see your lists as well. These must be people who did complete Beethoven symphony cycles, irrespective of anything else they may have done. That is the minimum requirement. Anybody who did not do that, your list will be deleted. I'm serious, folks. I'm limiting these things for a reason. The reason is that otherwise we get a free-for-all in which every performance of anything anybody's ever liked gets listed, and then the list is useless to people coming to see what the consensus is, or if there is a consensus, or to see, which Beethoven cycles they might like. We might do another series, the 5 greatest Beethoven performances of all time. And then we could all get into that. I mean, it's fine, but there's a time and a place for everything. So I'm asking you very nicely to let's play by the rules, okay? 5 greatest Beethoven conductors who did complete symphony cycles. Number 1, Arturo Toscanini. Of course, he's got to be on any list, doesn't he? I mean, Toscanini was the conductor who essentially defined the modern conducting style for, the 20th century, and he did it by playing Beethoven more than anything else. So, yeah, I mean, he did several Beethoven cycles, and there are live ones, and, the New York Philharmonic one, and then there's the NBC Symphony one, and you can assemble a best Beethoven cycle from all of the various ones. But generally speaking, when you consider how, old he was when he finally, got into his last period in the 1950s, late 40s and early 50s, in his 80s, and he retained his fire and passion till the very end. Really astonishingly. Sometimes he could be a little bit stiff and rhythmically rigid. And there was a great variety of tempo and emphasis from one performance to the next. Much more than in that German guy. Oh, what was his name? It's hard to remember. Oh, Fort something. That guy. Who was basically the same every single time. The only issue is whether or not he could get the orchestra to play it. Toscanini always got the orchestra to play it. But his views of the music changed rather fascinatingly from one performance to the next, and that's why he's so avidly collected by a lot of historical recording enthusiasts. But he was a splendid Beethoven conductor. Make no mistake about it. His recording of the 7th with the New York Philharmonic set a standard. I mean, George Szell said it set the standard for orchestral playing for like everybody else in the universe. So yeah, definitely Toscanini. Next, Otto Klemperer. Boy, was he different from Toscanini. Aha! Klemperer, actually, it's very interesting because, most of these guys had their roots in the 19th century. They were born in the 19th century. And Klemperer didn't begin as a great Beethoven conductor. When he ran the Kroll Opera and whatnot, he was very much a modernist, a modern music proponent. And you didn't associate his name with the German standards. But in the 1950s and 60s, Walter Legg, the producer at EMI, really created Klemperer, the grand old man of German music. And it was a model that a lot of record producers and record labels used afterwards. I mean, one of the most fascinating examples of it was Leonard Bernstein's Deutsche Grammophon Beethoven cycle, because Bernstein also was, he was the glitzy American show person thing, who had a polyglot list of talents and a generalist approach to repertoire, even though he did a very good Beethoven cycle with the New York Philharmonic, but he also did everything else. But for Deutsche Grammophon, he got the Vienna Philharmonic, and they had a picture of him with his snowy white hair, and all of a sudden they were positioning him as a GOM, a grand old man. Very, very interesting how they do that in the record industry, the promotional aspect of it. But Klemperer, I think, was the first that really had that. had that applied to him. And it happened to be true because his Beethoven was well, the word granitic is the one always uses when you talk about Klemperer. Measured in tempo, unsentimental, uncompromisingly heroic, and fabulously interesting to listen to because of his preference for the sonority of the woodwind section. He was amazing. And so his Beethoven has withstood the test of time, big time. Next, and this one may be a little controversial, Daniel Barenboim. Barenboim is something of a cipher. He is a conductor / pianist who is a student almost of the great 19th century Germanic tradition, early 20th century. His model in all things conducting was Furtwängler, where Furtwängler did the same repertoire. There's this flexibility of pulse and freedom to adopt some interesting emphases. And Barenboim, to his credit, waited really till he's still in his prime, but towards the latter bit of his career, to do a Beethoven cycle with the Staatskapelle Berlin. And it's sensational. And it's a sensational cycle in that tradition. It's the great Beethoven cycle that Furtwängler never did. It really is. It's absolutely remarkable and gorgeously played and beautifully recorded by Teldec at the time. It's now Warner, and it's one of the great Beethoven cycles. And what's more, it has character and personality that differentiate it from all of the modern cycles in the Toscanini tradition. The more strict in tempo, that sort of stuff. So I think Barenboim deserves a lot of credit for that Beethoven cycle. Of course, he remade one with his East-West divan polyglot ensemble in the Middle East, and it wasn't nearly as good, and he just shouldn't have bothered, and it was stupid, but that's the way things go today. That it really is. But that Beethoven cycle with the Staatskapelle Berlin is really, really special. And I think it needs to be acknowledged as such. And he spent his whole career as a Beethoven person. We talked about his multiple Beethoven sonata cycles. He did a lot of the chamber music. And now he did Fidelio. And now he's got one great Beethoven cycle. And that's saying a lot. And it's enough, actually. Also, definitely a great Beethoven conductor, George Szell. Wow, baby, ooh. Fabulous performances of the Eroica, the Fifth, the Eighth, the Sixth. His Pastoral Symphony is terribly underrated. His Seventh, with its amazing second movement. Szell was great in that standard German repertoire. He was acknowledged as such. And he also only did one Beethoven cycle, although there are individual performances. There's the live Vienna Beethoven Fifth, for example, which is just incredible. So I think that, Szell sort of is almost more famous as like a Mozart guy, but his Beethoven is astonishing. And it's also one of the great cycles. It's been in print for mostly forever and deserves its place in the pantheon. And last but not least, Günter Wand. Günter Wand is another conductor who RCA in this case positioned as the grand old man of German music. Truth is, he was. He really was, especially in the last couple of decades of his life, which was sort of the end of the 20th century when, the grand old man concept had kind of like faded away. Out came this guy who, like Klemperer, had been a contemporary music person earlier in his career, but who spent his later career returning to his roots, his musical roots. And he also only did one Beethoven cycle, although there are a couple other individual performances. And that one Beethoven cycle is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. There is a lot to be said in the old idea that there's value in scarcity, relative scarcity. This is the classical music business after all. But it's a given that, well, let's put it this way. He waited until towards the end of his career to do his Beethoven cycle, and he gave it everything he had. It's with the NDR Symphony Orchestra. They play fabulously for him. They know him well. It's got everything you want in a great Beethoven cycle. He took the time to do it right. We don't get that so much these days. Beethoven cycles these days are a dime a dozen. People release all 9 symphonies, and they don't even think about it. They do them all in 2 minutes, and what you get is what you expect. Well played, faceless, homogenized Beethoven. But that's not what you hear with Günter Wand. You have a certain level of quality and executional excellence, which is second to none. But the symphonies are individualized. They're played with enormous character and total command of the orchestra with ideal balances. And it's just amazing Beethoven. And that's it. Those are the 5 greatest Beethoven conductors. I know there are others. I am curious to see what your list comprises. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.